Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. They say you should never meet your heroes, but what they don't tell you is to be equally wary of marrying your enemies. Today on rSpace, if you're going to cheat on your spouse, maybe don't do it with someone recognizable to the local bartender, or better yet, just don't cheat at all. I discovered my wife's romantic affair. I exposed her cheating in front of her hometown friends and family, then left her with nothing. If you'd told me back in college that Mia would end up being my wife, I'd have laughed in your face. I mean, I'm laughing now because maybe that was the sign that I shouldn't even have bothered with the way things eventually turned out. But yeah, I probably would have thrown out a few choice insults about how she was the most insufferable person I'd ever met and how I'd rather off myself than end up married to her. Back then, Mia and I were rivals through and through. We had the same major, and from the first day, it felt like her mission in life was to make me miserable. Whenever I presented a project, it seemed like she just wanted to be the first to poke holes in it, tearing apart my work with a smirk. The snide comments she'd toss my way during group discussions didn't help either. My friends teased me constantly, calling her my arch nemesis, and joking that I had a weird crush on her because I always rose to her bait. Truth be told, I couldn't stand her, and I was pretty sure the feeling was mutual. Then, in our final year, the universe decided to mess with me. We got paired together for a semester-long project, one of those real-world experience assignments that professors love. I remember groaning internally when I saw her name next to mine on the assignment sheet. Working with Mia was a nightmare at first. We couldn't agree on anything. Every meeting started as a debate and ended as a full-blown argument. But somewhere in the chaos, things shifted. Slowly, we stopped trying to one-up each other and started listening. By the time we presented our project, we'd gone from being enemies to, well, reluctant allies. And after graduation, that connection stuck. For years, Mia and I were just friends. Good ones, actually. We even went on group trips with mutual friends. Somewhere along the way, the dynamic changed. I can't pinpoint when exactly, but I went from seeing her as a friend to someone I could see in my future, in a meaningful way. A few months later, I asked her out, and she said yes. A year or so after that, I proposed. And as much as it pains me to admit now, I went all out. I got a plane to fly with a banner asking her to marry me, all amidst a meticulously planned day. She said yes. Fast forward a few years, and we were married, settled, and living with what I thought was a good life. But looking back, there were cracks in the foundation that I was too blind to see. Mia had a way of drawing people in and slipping out of tight situations. She could be critical, sometimes unnecessarily so, and I found myself bending over backward to avoid conflict. If she didn't like the way I folded the laundry or the way I handled a work issue, she'd let me know in a tone that stung. I chalked it up to her being headstrong, the same way I'd both hated and admired back in university. But we were happy, or at least I was. We traveled, hosted dinner parties, and built a life together. But in hindsight, there were moments where her behavior felt off. She'd sometimes disappear for hours without explanation or claim she was working late, but come home smelling like a different perfume. When I'd ask her about it, she'd brush me off, saying I was being paranoid. I used to trust this woman with my life. I couldn't fathom her capable of betraying me. That trust was shattered 8 years ago. It started with something so innocuous, I almost brushed it off. Mia and I were out for dinner at a new place she'd been raving about for weeks. Afterward, as we strolled down the street, I bumped into a bartender I knew from my local pub. He's one of those lads you just click with. He's got a sharp wit and an uncanny ability to pour the perfect Guinness 10 times out of 10. I introduced him to Mia, and for a split second this dude did a double take. It was quick, but I noticed it. His expression shifted from friendly to something I couldn't quite place. He was polite and all, even going ahead to shake her hand, but the way he glanced at her felt off. Like he knew something he wasn't saying. Mia, on the other hand, wasn't quiet. For the rest of the evening, I was so tense. When I asked her if she knew him, she denied ever meeting him or seeing him, but something didn't sit right with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to that interaction than met the eye. By Friday, the suspicion was gnawing at me like a rat in the walls. I couldn't focus on anything else, so after work, I made my way to the pub. He was behind the bar as usual. The plan was simple: get a pint, wait for the place to clear out a bit, and casually ask him about what went down the other night. When the crowd thinned, I leaned in, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, about the other night," I started, forcing a chuckle like I was ready to snap. "You seemed a bit off when you met my wife. Is there something I should know?" He acted like he didn't hear me at first and just kept polishing a glass like I hadn't said a word. My patience wore thin. What's going on? Still nothing. It wasn't until I slipped him a few euros, a bribe I never thought I'd have to pull with someone I considered a mate, that he finally gave me the time of day. I thought I was cool with this guy, but clearly I was mistaken. He sighed heavily, looked around to make sure no one else was in earshot, and then leaned in. He started by saying that he wasn't one to get involved in people's business. But since you're asking, there's something you should know. She's been coming to the hotel I work at part-time, with some bloke. He admitted to having seen them a couple of times. He said when he saw her with me the other day, he couldn't place her at first, but then he remembered. My wife, my freaking wife, sneaking off to some hotel with another man. But as much as that information stung, it wasn't enough. I couldn't just storm home and accuse her outright. Mia was smart. Like I said, she could talk her way out of a locked room if it came down to it. She was a master at twisting situations to her advantage. I could already hear her excuses. He's just a coworker. He's gay. Or my personal favorite, why would you even assume something like that? And the worst part, she was so damn convincing that even I might have believed her if I didn't have more proof. I just left the pub that day and drove home in silence. By the time I walked through the door, Mia was already asleep in bed like nothing was wrong. I remember I sat in the living room for hours staring at the wall. The next day, I talked to Callum, one of my oldest mates. This was one of the idiots who'd egged me on about Mia back in college, teasing me endlessly about how we'd gone from rivals to friends. He'd even predicted, half-jokingly, that I'd end up marrying her. Well, look how that turned out. If there was one thing he excelled at, it was sniffing out information. If anyone could help me figure out what Mia was up to, it was him. Callum was more than happy to lend a hand, or maybe he just needed the cash. Either way, we had a plan. He'd shadow Mia, note her movements, and gather whatever evidence he could without being spotted. If she was meeting someone, he'd get photos. If she was sneaking around, he'd find out where and when. The first few days didn't turn up much. Mia's routine seemed normal, but I never thought I was wrong. But then Tuesday came, and everything changed. That evening, Callum called me, his voice heavy with something I didn't want to hear. He'd followed her after work and watched her drive to a hotel. There in the parking lot, she met a man. They didn't linger outside long, but Callum managed to snap a photo of them walking in together. When I saw that photo, my heart sank. There she was, my wife, strolling into a hotel with some guy I didn't recognize. They weren't holding hands, but the way they leaned into each other, standing just a little too close, made my blood boil. Still, it wasn't enough for me. I needed more if I was going to confront her, or better yet, destroy her. I needed irrefutable proof. I told Callum to keep going, to follow her every move. Over the next week, he became a shadow in Mia's life, meticulously tracking her patterns. What he uncovered was worse than I could have imagined. Her so-called late work meetings were nothing more than a cover. She'd been meeting the same man on a regular basis. They had a routine. Dinner at out-of-the-way restaurants, followed by a few hours holed up in a hotel. Callum got photos of them together, timestamps of their rendezvous, and even managed to snag a receipt from one place they visited. He told me not to ask how. The evidence piled up, and it was damning. A photo of them kissing in the parking lot of a cafe was the one that hit me the hardest. She looked so carefree, so comfortable with another man. This was the same woman who'd once told me I was her everything, and yet here she was, throwing it all away like our life together meant nothing. Then Callum sent me the final piece, a video of them in her car, locked in an embrace that left nothing to the imagination. I can't even describe the feeling of seeing that. It was like a gut punch, followed by the sharp sting of betrayal that cut deeper than I thought possible. By the end of Callum's investigation, I had a file full of evidence. Photos, videos, receipts, notes, enough to leave no room for excuses or lies. I remember sitting in my study late at night, flipping through the file while Mia slept soundly in our bed. It wasn't enough to confront her and walk away. No, that would have been too easy for her. Mia needed to face the consequences of her actions. She needed to feel the shame, the humiliation, the utter destruction she'd inflicted on me. And if there was one thing I've learned, it's that revenge is best served in a way that leaves a lasting impression. First, I let her continue her deceit for months while I meticulously prepared my next move. My lawyer was my first step. I handed him everything I had, airtight and undeniable. Under the law, adultery isn't always the straightforward slam dunk it should have been in divorce cases, but it can heavily influence financial settlements, especially when there's evidence of neglect, misappropriation of joint funds, and emotional harm. My lawyer assured me that with the proof of Mia using our joint account to wine and dine her lover, skipping out on our shared commitments, and betraying our marriage, I had a strong case to seek compensation. Not only was Mia the cheater, but she also earned more than I did, which gave me additional leverage. I wanted to ensure that when all this came crashing down, she wouldn't just lose her reputation, but would also feel it financially. To set the stage for my revenge, we had to go for her family's annual barbecue, which was like a hometown party of sorts. We went there every year. I framed this year's party as a romantic getaway, telling her it was a chance to reconnect and work on getting that baby she has been recently pressuring me about. Crazy how a woman who's cheating on you can want a baby with you. In the background, I worked tirelessly to perfect my plan. I contacted the same company I'd used for our proposal and told them I needed their services again. I gave them the full rundown, enough to make them sympathize with me, not that it mattered because the money did most of the convincing. This time, instead of a romantic message, I had something far less sweet to have fly across the sky. Next, I prepared the damning evidence. Photos of Mia with her lover, timestamps of the rendezvous. I also reached out to a few of her old friends from her hometown. I didn't spill everything, but gave them just enough to sow doubt. Curiosity is a powerful thing, and I knew they'd show up at the party eager to see what I had in store. The day of the trip arrived, and we drove to her hometown. Mia was in high spirits, chatting about the party and how wonderful it would be to see everyone. I played along, reminiscing about past visits, commenting on the neighbors we passed, and generally indulging her. The following day was the party, held in her family backyard as it sometimes was. Since Mia's parents were deeply religious, the church played a significant role in organizing the event, which meant that half the village was in attendance. It was the usual mix of family, friends, and nosy locals eager for gossip and free food. By the time we arrived, the party was in full swing. I kept my cool, smiling and making small talk like everything was normal. But inside, I was counting down the minutes. The plane was scheduled to arrive mid-party, and when I heard the distant hum of its engine, my pulse quickened. As the plane drew closer, people began to look up. The sound of the engine cut through the noise of the party, drawing everyone's attention. Mia turned her gaze skyward, a smile spreading across her face. She must have thought I was pulling another grand romantic gesture. For a brief second, I saw the excitement in her eyes, the same look she'd had during my proposal years ago. But then the plane came close enough, and the message was easy to read, written in bold, unmistakable letters. Mia cheated on me. The reaction was instant. Gasps and so many faces turning toward her. Mia froze, her wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering on the ground. Her face turned pale as the reality of what was happening sank in. And I wasn't done yet. I'd arranged for packets of photos, each containing the incriminating evidence. As I started to hand them out, the murmurs grew louder, probably because they knew what they likely contained. The murmurs turned into whispers, and then full-blown shouting. Mia's parents looked mortified, their faces a mix of confusion and shame. One by one, people's expressions shifted from shock to disgust. Photos of Mia and her lover in compromising positions. There was no room for excuses, no chance for her to gaslight her way out of this one. Mia stood there, frozen, as the weight of her actions crashed down around her. People were pointing, whispering, and outright staring at her with open disdain. Her parents looked like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. And me? I just stood there, watching the chaos unfold, feeling a grim satisfaction that, for once, the truth wasn't something she could twist or deny. That wasn't the last time I joined them for the annual party, obviously, but it was worth every second. The shame, the humiliation, the fallout, Mia had it coming, and I made dang sure she got exactly what she deserved. Mia tried to pull me aside, her voice shaking. "What the hell are you doing?" "What am I doing?" I said. My voice was calm, but it was dripping with venom. "I'm showing everyone the real you, Mia. The one who decided to sneak around with another man was worth more than our marriage." She burst into tears, trying to play the victim, but I was already walking back to the car to drive back home to pick up my stuff and leave her hometown. I didn't stick around for the fallout since I had enough satisfaction from just seeing things unfold. I sent a message to her that my lawyer would be in contact. I left her standing there, humiliated and exposed, and checked into a hotel for the night. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal, just as I'd hoped. Here, divorce laws aren't as cut and dried as in the US, but I had the upper hand in every possible way. Infidelity might not directly strip someone of their entitlement here, but it certainly tilts the scales. Mia, predictably, tried to fight back. She accused me of being vindictive, claimed I'd orchestrated everything to ruin her, and she tried to spin the narrative as if I were the villain. None of it stuck. The facts spoke for themselves, and her arguments fell apart under scrutiny. In the end, she walked away with nothing. I kept the house, the savings, and, to my relief, our dog. A point she'd contested just to spite me, even though she barely cared for him. Legally and financially, I came out unscathed, but emotionally, this was a different story. It's been years since the divorce, and while life has moved on, I can't say I've fully healed. I've got a girlfriend now and a kid, but marriage? That's off the table for me. I've seen what it can do. The lies, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching fallout, and I'm not interested in walking that road again. As for Mia, the last I heard, she's still running her business and living her life, though not married. I wouldn't know firsthand. I haven't had any contact with her since the divorce. What little I know comes from Callum, who occasionally updates me despite my indifference. He's a loyal friend, but even he knows that I don't care to hear much about her anymore. Life's been good for me career-wise, and I've got a lot to be thankful for, but the scars Mia left run deep. Trust doesn't come easily now, and sometimes I wonder if it ever will. It's like a vice that tightens whenever I let someone get too close, a constant reminder of what I went through. Oddly enough, I still hear from her family every now and then. They'll message me, asking if I know where Mia is or if I've heard from her. Apparently they struggle to get in touch with her, and for reasons I can't quite explain, I haven't blocked them. Maybe it's because I genuinely liked her family. They were good people, caught in the crossfire of Mia's mess. I've warned them not to contact me, but a part of me can't bring myself to sever that final thread completely. So there it is, everything laid bare. I'm doing well, all things considered. I've got my life, my job, and my family, but the trust I lost in that marriage is something I'm still working to rebuild. Maybe writing this will help me let go of the last bits of bitterness I've been holding on to, or maybe it's just a reminder that, even after all this time, some wounds don't fully heal. I mean, if she's risking it all, at least let it be for someone who's actually worth risking it all for. This guy clearly wasn't worth it. Look at it this way, OP. You're dodging years of towel-folding lectures. Like, really? Towels? If her hill to die on was how you fold them, she's been looking for an exit ramp since day one. This is a blessing in disguise, OP. You're free. What do you think? Has a cheating spouse ever criticized you for something like folding towels? Share your stories with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.